Good evening and welcome once again to WarrenThornton.com. Hello and welcome to A World Gone Crazy. James Tweedy. Obviously we're going to start with Venezuela, and we've got some bits and pieces that we need to talk about, and we're going to go through it in very great detail to make sure we cover all bases. We're also going to have a little look at all the hypocrisy that is out there as well to do with this, because of course we do find more and more that we're getting more and more of this nonsense, James. Your thoughts, first of all, on the operation that took place?
Okay, a lot has been said about it.
We just need your mic level to come up, James.
Sorry. The basic point is that it was quite extraordinary. It's like the assault back in 1989 that kidnapped Manuel Noriega from Panama, but Panama was definitely a U.S. colony and still is, and Noriega was their man, and they were just.
I was there at the time.
Right. Okay. Yes, I think you told me, but it's also something. It means that the US can't really take the high ground, the moral high ground on a lot of issues now as well, because they've done something which is quite extraordinary and a huge overreach and very, very blatant, and you see people defending it, certain people defending it on social, commentators defending it, and other people attacking it. But the only defense they can really muster, the Trump supporters or the general kind of neoconservatives or whatever you want to call them, is that the US, might makes right, and the US can do whatever it wants in the world, especially in Latin America. So there you go.
Yeah. Let's get into some of this then, James, because we're getting a lot of people talking all sorts of stuff about this, and there are people almost, how can I put it, almost losing the plot when it comes to this, because it's put everybody in a bit of a quandary. You're saying about the moral high ground here. And of course, this causes a huge problem, doesn't it, for the European Union? Because they can't really have a go at Putin if they're having it. You can't turn around and say, oh, Putin can't invade Ukraine if America are doing this, or can you? I see you raising your eyes there. The moral high ground is nonsense. Let's hear from James first, then Sean Murphy. James, this is a moral quandary, isn't it? I mean, if you turn around and you go, America are okay, as far as we're concerned, it's a horrible regime and we needed to get rid of Maduro and all the rest of it, and then go, but we've got to have the international rule-based order. That's just hypocrisy on a grand scale.
If you're going to start removing, if you're going to use that justification for it, then there's a long list of sort of worse regimes, Venezuela is down the bottom, near the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And the worst thing you can say about Nicolas Maduro is that possibly, his own allies or former allies think he cheated in the last presidential election, or the last, legislative elections.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I think we've lost James for a second. Can everybody else hear me, or is it me that you've lost?
No, no,
Uh,
we can hear you
uh,
on.
we've lost James Tweedy there for a second. Sean, you were going to make a point.
Yeah, I think on the face of it, America has taken the immoral high grounds.
Yeah, yeah, it does seem to be that way, doesn't it? I'll just send James a message to let him know he's not here any longer. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right when it comes to the moral high ground or whatever. It is quite incredible that you would see the nonsense that is coming out of there, and it is nonsense. I don't think we can ever. We've got James Tweedy back now. Sean Murphy was just saying America seems to have taken the immoral high ground, James Tweedy.
Okay, what I was trying to say there was that I don't know why it cut off. I thought, I saw your face moving. That the EU seems to have been taken by surprise by it. The other NATO countries, right? They don't seem to know what to say about it. Some of them are criticizing the US, and some of them are trying to sort of, like and ah and say something non-committal. They can't. If you're going to justify it by criticism of Nicolas Maduro's government, he's down the bottom of all the people you should be removing if you're going to do that, right? Yeah. He's near the bottom of the list. The worst thing that's been said about him really is that he's incompetent his government is incompetent, and that they possibly cheated in the last presidential election, even and that's coming from their allies. Both those criticisms come from their allies, right?
Yeah.
Or former allies. And what else was I going to say? I'll leave it there. It'll come back to me.
Let's get into this then, because obviously we've got some people who are full of it. Labour MPs. Let's have a little look at Prime Minister's question time here.
Over the weekend, the US conducted airstrikes on a series of Venezuelan targets and confirmed that it had
abducted or kidnapped
Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. I can confirm to the House that the UK was not involved in these operations. UK policy on Venezuela has long been to press for a peaceful transition from authoritarian rule to a democracy which reflects the will of the Venezuelan people and maintains security in the region and is in line with international law. That remains our position and our determined view about what must happen in Venezuela now. It is, of course, for the US to set out the legal basis for their actions, and the UN Security Council is discussing Venezuela this afternoon. These issues will continue to be matters for international discussion. The House will have seen recent comments from the United States and from Denmark regarding Greenland. Let me be very clear on the UK position. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Our close European partners, our long-standing NATO allies, and all our countries work closely together on security issues and will always do so. The future of Greenland is a matter for the Greenlanders and Danes and no one else.
Work is a pain in the apps. My files are in this app. My chat's in this app.
If a large and powerful country abducts the leader of another, however abhorrent that leader is, and then tries to intimidate the smaller country in order, it says, called out, not just by Britain, but by our Western allies, we should be calling it out for what it is, a breach of international law. It is not for the country that is breaking the law to say whether or not it has broken the law. It is for the West, surely, to stand up and say, call it as it is. Doesn't she therefore share my concern that there might be a profound risk of international...
Okay. Hello?
Who was that, James?
That lady is Emily Thornberry, who was somebody who was in the shadow cabinet under Jeremy Corbyn and helped Keir Starmer stab Jeremy Corbyn in the back and then didn't get a job in his cabinet as a result, because she was she'd made herself too unpopular. She was too pro EU, you see. She was anti-Brexit, pro EU. So that's Emily Thornberry. So now she's on the back benches, and she's, you know, she's sort of she's not subject to the same discipline as every other as cabinet, as government ministers, so she criticizes the government from time to time.
Sorry about that. For some strange reason, the internet seems to have played up. Thank you for standing in there, James. We're talking about the UK, of course, and everybody that sort of stood up. Half the people are turning around and saying great, James. Half the people are turning around and saying not great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of I don't know, people who don't like Donald Trump basically are saying it's a bad thing, and people who do like I was trying to say earlier, that the people who support Trump or just support this kind of behavior, they don't really have a justification for it. All it is that we're the biggest kid in the playground and we can bully who we like, right? And then other people are complaining, saying, "Oh, Trump is a bully, boo-hoo." Okay. Yvette Cooper there was saying that it is, she was talking about international law, and then Emily Thornberry was talking about how the West should stand up to the USA. International law what is international law? Sorry. I mean, maybe you're talking about the UN Charter. It's a really vague idea. If you're talking about the UN Charter, then the British government does not have the right to say that there should be a peaceful transition or a violent transition or any kind of transition to another government in Venezuela. It needs to stay out of Venezuela's internal affairs. Emily Thornberry says the West needs to stand up to the USA. And why is the West the arbiter? You know, I mean, what about the rest of the world? You know. And then she says, however abhorrent. You know, I mean, Nicolas Maduro might have been a bit of a fool, but he's not abhorrent.
It's quite crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, the point is, okay, so you see all these memes on the internet about how this is how Russia should do this is a lesson to Russia about how it should do a special military operation. But what? You know, like you go in and you kidnap. Well, they should have kidnapped Zelensky, but left all the people around Zelensky running the government. You know, but Zelensky wasn't running that government. The USA was running that government, and things like that. You know, so and that's the other thing. Like here, the USA removed someone. You know, kidnapped someone who they didn't like. In Ukraine, you know, like it wouldn't have mattered if the Russians had gotten rid of Zelensky by hook or by crook or something. It wouldn't matter now. That's why they're not doing it. They've never tried to kill him or abduct or you know, grab him or whatever, because there would just be another one. There's a long line of them waiting to take over and continue the policy that they're being shown. So anyway, a lot of people have said this. A couple of wiser commentators than me have said that they've done this thing. The US has done this thing. It's shot its credibility. It can't take the moral high ground on anything anymore. Looks bad, and they've achieved nothing by it, except that they've got this guy and his wife, and they can put them on a show trial in New York, as it is. But the same government is still in power in Venezuela, and if they want, they might be able to get what they want from them by negotiation. But they could have done that anyway. They could have done that months ago. They could have done that without spending all this money on you know, flying loads of helicopters and taking the risk that some of them, you know, because they could quite easily have been shot down. Everyone's saying that as well. You know, they weren't.
Yes, if they hadn't had help from the inside, it could quite easily have turned out very, very badly. The thing that we have, so let's get into some bits and pieces for this, because I don't know if you caught the actual picture. I mean, this is, I mean, this is a horrible look, isn't it? When you see Maduro's wife there, cable tied. I mean, honestly, James, and the parade of these people, I found that particularly abhorrent.
Well, they perp walked them, and that's kind of normal. I mean, they tried to perp walk Cliff Richard of all people years ago, and he wasn't there. He was at his other home in Portugal when the police went to search his house, and then they phoned the BBC to come down with the cameras. Right?
Yeah.
No perp walk there. Yeah, I mean, again, yes, it's a leader, so why, again, you're justifying other countries doing that to leaders of third countries and things like that. Celia Flores, they've been accusing her of drug trafficking for a long time.
Yeah.
I think they got one or two of her nephews, and they're in jail in the USA. Right? They were arrested. They were also arrested in another country in the Caribbean, might have been Haiti, I can't remember, and then extradited, and then taken to the USA, extradited or otherwise rendered to the USA for trial. And I mean, it begs all sorts of questions. Why would the wife of the president, who you accuse of, incidentally, of enriching himself at the people's expense or whatever, because they accuse everyone of that. Why would she, if her and Nicholas are getting rich off the oil business and other things and other contracts with other countries, then why would they be dealing drugs? Why would they have to deal with drugs? And bear in mind that the cocaine doesn't really come from Venezuela. There isn't a lot of coca cultivation in Venezuela. Where it happens is in Colombia or Bolivia, and in Bolivia they use it to make tea. So in Colombia is the place, right? So they'd have to be importing it from Colombia if they're going to smuggle it from Venezuela to the USA. And maybe some people are doing that, but enough of it is coming directly from Colombia anyway. So the whole thing is nonsense. But yeah, they've been after her for years. They put her on the list. But yes, she is now a kind of elderly woman. She's probably approaching old age.
Nothing to do with oil, then, James.
Like I said, the oil. There's two things you can say. Firstly, the Venezuelan oil industry was always about exporting to the USA. And the Venezuelan National Oil Company, that's always been nationalized, it was nationalized before Hugo Chavez was president, owns refineries and this whole chain of petrol stations, gas stations, whatever you want to call them, called Citgo in the USA. And they also distribute heating oil for homes. They sell heating oil for homes, right? And so there's that whole thing. And they could just, and the company PDVSA, the oil company, Petróleos de Venezuela, has granted concessions to lots of foreign companies, including US companies. There aren't so many US companies now as there were back in 2000. That's for sure. Some of them left because they didn't like the changes in terms and having to pay more tax. But again, doing this is not changing that fact. Kidnapping Maduro and his wife is not changing that fact. What will change that fact is negotiation with Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, and the rest of his government, right? Unless they're going to go in there and forcibly change the government. And they're not. I mean, if they were going to do that, they would have done it on January the 3rd. They wouldn't have just kidnapped Maduro and then left, and then left.
Which tells you that Dulcie is pretty much in the pocket and just playing the game.
it's not clear, right? So
What about the meetings in
people who
Doha then,
argue
Jay?
that there's an argument that what she said the other day, right? She said this thing about cooperation with the USA, right, and on mutually, beneficial and respectful cooperation. Maduro had been saying that for ages, all right? They've been trying to get foreign investment from other countries in Venezuela. Repsol, the Spanish oil company, is there. There's a lot of Turkish investment, Turkey's a member of NATO. And so on. So they've been trying to do that, and they probably wouldn't be against the US oil companies coming back in if they get to stay in power. And if they do that, why wouldn't they stay in power? Why would the US try and why would they bother with a regime change operation if they can just they can make a deal with the guys in charge? It's just, the question is, why did they bother to do that with Maduro though?
Yes.
Is it just to show that they could? Is it all a big theater to say, oh, we called this guy a drug dealer and now we've captured, they've been accusing him of everything, of eating babies for breakfast or whatever for years. So, it's embarrassing for them to then do a deal with him. But then I suppose if you remove him, then you can do a deal with Delcy Rodriguez or whatever, who I'm not sure they're really accused of much. I mean, I think she's been under sanctions for something or other, but, for being part of the government, basically. But yeah, I mean, this is it. Maybe it's just a pretext for then doing a deal with the rest of Maduro's government while you've got him on trial.
So let's get into a little.
Have I gotten lost, or have you?
Warren's frozen again. Warren's frozen. He's making you the star of the show today.
I wondered if that was me.
No,
Nope.
no.
It's all right.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, he's back. So the indictment that they're saying, it only mentions now once or twice on there about the drug cartel. But they were pushing this part of this cartel for ages and ages and ages. This cartel de la Soles last year designated the Venezuelan slang term for drug corruption in the military as a terrorist organization and said he led it. But they popped that like a hot potato, James.
They're charging him with, what they call narco terrorism, which is, well, is it? Are you drug? Is it drug smuggling or is it terrorism? Which, and then also taking up arms against the United States, basically. Again, he didn't do that. It reminds me of when a few years back in 2015, I think it was, Barack Obama designated Venezuela as a threat to US national security and its foreign policy. And Venezuela is not a threat in any way to US national security. It doesn't have, the military forces to threaten the US in any way, right? And but then there was that part about its foreign policy. Well, okay, if another country does something and it undermines your foreign policy, well, tough, I mean, is your foreign policy necessarily beneficial to everybody? It's up to you to make your policies work. So, but what he was trying to say, what Obama was trying to say, was basically admitting was that Venezuela was, by doing some, it's essentially charitable works in neighboring countries and so forth, and support for countries like Cuba, trading with Cuba, supplying Cuba with oil, was interfering with US attempts to knock over the governments of those countries, right? So
Right.
there we go. So, and that you know that what you know that's inflating the idea of that idea of making Venezuela, claiming Venezuela is a threat to the US when it's ridiculous. You know, it's
Quite clearly not.
like a flea on an elephant's back.
Yeah.
Then
So let me ask you a question then.
This is the same thing.
Let me ask
Go
you a
on, yeah,
question
go on.
then. Let me ask you a question. What are we going to do about the Inuit cartel that is absolutely trafficking tons of cocaine through Greenland? I mean, we can see just from the map there that the place is inundated with it. America are going to have to
Yeah.
take over Greenland because of the Inuit cartel, aren't they? That'll be the next thing coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, well, there we go. What does Trump want with Greenland? This is the question.
He says that it's they basically need it for security, but it's over 3,000 miles away, James.
Well, it's not really that far from the US.
It is.
Okay, well, anyway. The US has a base, I think, in Greenland.
Yeah.
It has a military base. It's had bases there since the Second World War. Right?
Yeah.
And if it wants to maintain the base there, then it can. It can just ask Denmark, and Denmark will say yes. So what do they want with it? You know, I mean, it is a wasteland and it's got almost no population. And the
got lots of oil.
There might be. How do you get it?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the Greenland ice sheet is several miles thick.
Yes.
You know, and then the people of Greenland, you know, my brother lives in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and you meet Greenlanders.
Is he nervous?
There. No, not really. Why would you be nervous? You meet Greenlanders there, and the Greenlanders don't really consider themselves to be Danish.
No, they don't. To be fair,
right? And the Faroese don't either, but they just, you know, so they want independence. I think Iceland used to be, it was at one point a colony of, you know, like a part of territory of Denmark, but they got independence again. Okay. Iceland was founded by people who were outlaws from Norway, by the way. And so there's that, you know, there's that question. But do they necessarily want to be part of the USA? You know, I mean, they wouldn't be a state, probably. They wouldn't get to elect a member of Congress and 2 senators, right? Yes. They would just be, they would have almost no representation at all. They'd just be a territory like Puerto Rico.
Is it going to be the guy who owns the biggest fishing pole?
Yeah, well, you know, or basically it would be equally bad. You know, it would be just as bad, and except that your boss wouldn't even speak the same language as you. Yeah. So,
just for your geographical knowledge going forward, James, 3,025 miles is the shortest distance between the USA and Greenland.
Okay. Well, also the you know, Canada is a member of NATO, and I'm sure the US can use. I mean, the US has it flies its bombers over Canada to circle around and you know, sit there on standby to go and attack Russia or China, things like that.
Just in case.
Yeah, you know, so you know, and certainly, what did Donald Trump say? It's surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships. Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. And what?
No.
Even if they are, even if it is, then what? You know, what can they do? They can't really do anything.
3,000 miles away.
Are they going to steal the ice?
Yeah.
You know,
one of those, mate. You can't have a decent drop of vodka without the ice. Louis Bastos.
I sailed in '97 from Plymouth to Iceland with Sir Robert Knox Johnson, as you all know him, I think. And Iceland was okay, but we calculated that Greenland is closer to Canada and the US than it is to Denmark.
Yep, it is. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Of course. James is getting quickly checking all his distances now.
No, sorry, I'm
the
hassling me.
thing that we have though, Greenland is just a red herring, isn't it? This is to deflect away from the fact that they really haven't got anything on Maduro. I mean, this is just complete false red herring. America aren't going to go into Greenland anytime soon. I'd be absolutely staggered if they did. And this is just to stop everybody talking about the illegality of what's been done, hasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. It is a weird thing. It is very strange to be talking about Greenland.
So let's talk about some of the illegitimacy then, or some of the things that they're going to be put forward. We did this at lunchtime, but I want to go through this with James. So let's start with the illegitimacy of Nicolas Maduro's election. The irrelevance under international law is the first thing. Whether Maduro's election meets US approval standards is entirely irrelevant under international law. The internal electoral affairs of a sovereign nation are not the business of another sovereign nation. This principle is foundational to international law and the UN Charter. There is no legal mechanism that allows one state to overthrow another one based on disputed elections. The idea that the United States has moral standing to object to electoral legitimacy is laughable when viewed historically. The US has ignored, enabled, or directly supported election fraud, coups, and outright dictatorships across the globe. Unless it suddenly became geopolitically useful to object, democracy is invoked, never consistently. James, would you agree with that?
There are all sorts of. You can criticize the democratic system in a lot of countries. You can criticize it in the US. I mean, the US is a republic and Britain is a constitutional monarchy, but it's. I mean, the system here is a lot simpler and more streamlined, and generally, is basically more democratic than that. Ironically,
okay,
right? And you can. And which country is not a democracy? I mean, Saudi Arabia has a parliament, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone goes, "Oh, Saudi Arabia is a monarchy." Well, has a parliament. Britain has had a parliament for 800 years. Nobody says, people would say, "Oh, well, under Henry VIII, it wasn't a democracy, or it wasn't a democracy back in the." Under the
he still had to go to Parliament. Henry VIII, he still had to go to Parliament to get things done.
Well,
if he wanted money for a war or whatever.
Yeah. So here are these things. So you struggle to find a country which is not a democracy, but everyone says, "Oh, that country's a dictatorship." Russia's a dictatorship. They just had an election last year. Venezuela's a dictatorship. They have elections every year they have some sort of election there to show how democratic they are.
So let's speak about that then, James, because that is part of the thing I wanted to talk to you with. Because you were saying about there are people that Venezuela is very low down on the list. So authoritarianism or dictatorship, the US actively supports and arms regimes that are far more authoritarian, some with no elections at all. Authoritarianism becomes a problem only when a government is economically or geopolitically non-compliant with the United States. Emergency powers, arrests and restrictions in Venezuela occurred in the context of open coup attempts, economic warfare, foreign recognition of a parallel government. They remove that context and anything can be framed as tyranny, can't it?
Well, like I say, lots of countries which have elections are then dismissed as dictatorships because we don't like who they elected.
Yes.
Like in Russia, I mean, there's no question that Vladimir Putin is that popular that he gets 80% of the vote in a presidential election, right?
Yeah.
And because the polls show that, all the polls show that, right? All the opinion polls show
even the Western ones.
You talk to people on the street, right?
Yeah.
No, you can't really challenge that. Yeah, he's not a tyrant. He's not a dictator. And he's just, and the idea that, by the way, not having term limits on a presidency like the US only introduced in 1947 because they didn't want someone like Franklin Roosevelt, who got elected 4 times president. He was president 4 times.
He did,
yeah, right. They didn't want that. They didn't want someone else like that who might actually change something slightly, right? So if we don't follow their suit doing that, which they did in my parents' lifetime, then you're not democratic. You have to put term limits. You have to limit the president to 1 or 2 terms of office so that the people don't, which is anti-democratic. The people might want to keep re-electing them. You know, that's who the people want. Generally, the one who's in is the one that the people want, right? And then you say that you can't have him again. Right?
That's
so all this
kind of crazy.
nonsense, all this, it's rubbish. Like, again, this is like, trying to measure the world by the standard of the US political system, which was designed, the Constitution was drafted by Alexander Hamilton, who didn't believe in democracy. He thought it was a really bad idea. So he designed a system where voting would never change anything, because the president would be able to overrule. There'd be 2 houses of Congress for some reason. Nobody knows why, right? They're both elected. Why do you have to have both, right? They overrule each other. They block each other's They can block each other's legislation. They're elected on a different time schedule than the president. So the opposition is running the Congress while the president, one party is running Congress and another one is running the White House, right? The president can veto acts of Congress. The Congress can block things that the president does. You have an unelected Supreme Court that can overrule both of them, and blah 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 blah. And it's a completely dysfunctional system. Why try and measure
that's democracy,
the rest
though,
of the
James,
world by that dysfunctional system instead of the British system, which is the original system of democracy?
Well,
the party that's got a majority in Parliament is the government, and everyone else gets
tagged
stuff
along. And of course, democracy, as Charles I said, is a Greek drollery based on the extraordinary idea that there are extraordinary abilities in the most ordinary of people, as he put it when he was trying to defend himself. Let's get into the sanctions then on Venezuela, because the humanitarian crisis cited as justification was dramatically worsened, if not primarily caused by US sanctions, especially financial and oil sanctions imposed after 2017, strangling a country's ability to import food, medicine, and industrial inputs, and then blame the government for the resulting suffering. Human rights language is being used instrumentally, but not sincerely. If humanitarian concern were genuine from the US, sanctions would be lifted first. Instead, suffering is used as leverage, not a problem to be solved. Would that be correct, James?
Human rights is anytime someone mentions human rights, I just switch off, or I know what they're up to, because they're basically it's always used as an attack. Someone wrote something once, actually, on social media. I know, one of my Facebook friends wrote something once, where they use it as a sword, not a shield. They use it to attack the government, another country, not defend people.
Yes. Yeah, exactly that. Let's get into this then. Let's talk about the corruption angle. So this is universality without consequence. Corruption exists in virtually every state, including the United States. It's never grounds for invasion, sanctions, or regime change, unless it serves as a convenient narrative weapon. US indictments of Venezuelan officials have no legitimate jurisdiction and rely heavily on testimony from incentivized defectors. Accusation is treated as conviction, James.
I don't know. I mean, people are usually tried in the media, aren't they? Anything like that. Look, I mean, the US has, created to a large extent the economic crisis in Venezuela that is there. That's real, right? The criticism of the government there is that they didn't diversify the economy and actually make themselves self-sufficient on things that they could be self-sufficient for.
Yeah.
Right. And so and they left themselves vulnerable to that, and they've kept their economy geared towards the USA, orientated towards the USA, right? And they always wanted, that means that they always want to be in bed with the USA.
Yes.
Right. That's the whole so-called Bolivarian revolution is that they wanted, and they never had a revolution. I say it's a so-called revolution because they never wanted a real revolution. They kept multi-party democracy, which meant that they would eventually lose an election. They didn't really change anything. They didn't, things that which is nationalized now was essentially nationalized before.
Yep.
Like the state oil company. And all they've done is like take the money and spend it on welfare statism for some people, and not really create an economy for those people. Not really, So they're still poor. People are still living in shacks. Some of them, they built new housing, they've improved the health service, but they were always kind of dependent on Cuba to do that. They improved the education system. They built more schools and stuff, improved the education system.
So
but what is that? That's just like, and by the way, that's not, like communist dictatorship or something. That's what the USA has, actually. The USA has the same welfare statism as Britain or France. And Britain is the country that invented liberal democracy, parliamentary democracy, and capitalism.
Yeah.
Right. And the idea that Britain is socialist in any way is nonsensical.
Okay. Well, let's ask a question on that then. When we're talking about economic mismanagement, right? So economic decline is blamed on many cases like this on socialism, while systematically excluding the impact of sanctions, capital flight, asset seizures, trade embargoes, and financial isolation. Even if Venezuela's economic model is flawed, and whose isn't, policy failure is not a justification for overthrow. If it were, including the United States itself, half the world would qualify, wouldn't it?
No, they did. Yeah, they created problems. Some of the big business people there, including the owners of Polar, which is a brewery, but is also the biggest food distributor in the country, right? Helped create a crisis, they created like artificial shortages. Okay, so this is a thing. So, and those people are opponents of the owner of Polar happens to be the cousin of one of the opposition leaders, Leopoldo Lopez, and his other cousin lives in New York and runs a human rights organization. So the owner of Polar created these shortages, and then Leopoldo Lopez exploited that to get people to riot against the government, and people were killed in the riots, and then he was jailed for incitement. And then when he was jailed for incitement, his other cousin in New York said, "Oh, it's a human rights abuse," So all that goes on.
So we're gonna
Venezuela, they say everything is socialist. The Venezuelan government say they're socialists. Their party is the United Socialist Party. Everything they do is socialist. It's about as socialist as Donald Trump, right? It's not a country like Cuba. Cuba is the only like worker state in the Western Hemisphere. It's like Britain or France with a welfare state. That's all it is. It's the same welfare state that we have.
It's exactly the same thing, just wrapped up in different language. Let's get on to this, and I'm going to leave the drug thing till last. But regional stability, migration spikes and regional strain closely track sanctions escalation, not internal Venezuelan policy alone. The instability is then blamed on the target. Far worse instability in US-aligned states is framed as complex challenges, not justification for overthrow. So regional stability goes out the window, doesn't it, James?
The US doesn't want stability in the region. It wants the whole point of, let's say, the criticism of classic colonialism is that the colonies were underdeveloped. They didn't have their own industries. There was just mining. And the only thing that the colonial power would do, like Britain or France, was they would build a port and they would build a road and roads and railways from the port to the mines, and that was it. And they wouldn't build any roads or railways connecting to the neighboring colonies, you know, the neighboring countries as they became of Africa or wherever, right? And they wouldn't they would only extract raw materials, and they wouldn't really produce anything in that country. If they did, it would be limited, you know, and they would take the raw materials back to the you know, Britain or France, and they would produce goods, and then they would sell them. They would export them again from the raw materials, and they'd export them again to the colonies and sell them there, right? And if you have political stability, people are going to elect governments that promise to get foreign investment and build factories and things, and, you know, create jobs for people, right? And then you won't be able to, the USA won't be able to sell its goods, or Spain won't be able to sell its goods to those countries. You go around those countries, the Spanish national telephone company, Telefonica, is running the mobile phone networks.
It is.
And the landline networks, all the phone networks and internet, right? And then you go by, you know, you want to get some oil to put in your car, and it's, you know, it's a US brand that you're buying, you know, like Quaker State or something.
Yes.
You don't get Quaker State over here, but in Guatemala, where my wife is from, you see the Quaker State and all these other signs everywhere, right? So you're buying goods from those, you know, goods and services are coming from the former colonial power, Spain, that was kicked out 200 years ago, before Telefonica existed, because the telephone hadn't been invented yet. Or it's coming from the USA. And what they don't want is, you know, those countries, you know, they don't want Venezuela building up this huge some sort of industry and having car factories there, and, you know, Chinese car factories or whatever, or Peugeot or Fiat car factories there, you know, building cars and all that sort of thing. If people are buying, people down there are driving cars that have been bought secondhand in the USA and exported there.
Yeah,
that's what they drive, you know.
Okay, we've got three more things I want to cover with you. The nonsense of international consensus, which is sort of manufactured alignment. Consensus tends to mean US allies and client state, large portions of the global South reject the coup narrative outright. There is no UN Security Council authorization for intervention. That alone ends the legal argument, doesn't it?
Sorry, what was that?
So there is no UN Security Council authorization for intervention in Venezuela. That alone ends the legal argument, doesn't it, for them going in there in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, the UN Charter says that the country should not be interfering with each other's internal affairs. So they shouldn't be doing that anyway. And then technically, you know, in theory, you can't go to war. You're not allowed to go to war, and it is a war crime if you don't get a resolution from the UN Security Council authorizing that. Which is why the USA has not declared war on any country since the Second World War, right? Because it does not. Well, I mean, maybe in the Korean War, you know, it was the United Nations forces or something that was operating. But after that, basically, I can't think of a war that has really been authorized by the UN, apart from, let's say, that the no-fly zone authorization over Libya, right, in 2011. So there may be some others, okay, but really, like the Iraq War, they didn't have a resolution for the Iraq War or for Afghanistan, invading Afghanistan or invading Iraq. You see, so all of these things are like that. But yeah, I mean,
so in that case, then, James, let's get on to the two things that are most quoted. The rules-based international order. Now, sanctions without UN approval, asset seizures, recognition of parallel governments, economic warfare, all violate international law, yet get justified retroactively. The rules always seem to, the international based order of rules always seem to point downwards, never up.
Okay, rules-based international order is a jargon. And if you want to talk, I mean, what does that mean if it doesn't mean, if you're talking about the UN Security Council or the UN Charter, which involves the UN Security Council, then that's what you should be talking about. You should say, well, this is against the UN, we want to uphold the UN Charter. But when you say the rules-based international order, that's not a thing.
No,
it doesn't exist.
No,
it's just a concept, which is very, very vaguely defined and is essentially defined by the USA.
Let's pick on the little guy, basically.
Right? So it's whatever they want it to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
So
then like international community doesn't mean, what is the international community if it's not the UN? Why are you not talking about, why don't you just say the UN?
Exactly.
Because members of the UN are being singled out for attack by the international community, which is the NATO countries and Australia.
Okay.
And Japan, right?
Well, let's get into this then, because this is the main bugbear. Drug trafficking and narco state, right? So this is pure assertion, zero adjudication. These claims originate almost entirely from US law enforcement and intelligence agencies with a long track record of fabrication in overthrowing government. Now, the US claims the right to prosecute foreign leaders for alleged crimes committed outside US territory while refusing international jurisdiction over its own leaders.
Yeah, okay. So the US does this with a lot of things. It unilaterally extends its jurisdiction to the world and threatens legal action against countries for things which happen outside of its borders. So companies like banks have been pressurized to close accounts of political campaigns in Britain from the US, right? So those political campaigns are, for instance, in solidarity with Cuba or Palestine, and their accounts get closed by the banks because the US is saying, well, this is an account that's benefiting Cuba. They started with the Cuban tourist agency and the embassies and things like that, but then they went on to political campaigns, and so that's their kind of jurisdictional overreach, and they do it with lots of things, and they do it to lots of people, like Julian Assange. So that's not unusual for them. It's nothing new, but it is dodgy. It's nonsense, right? And then yes, they don't. The US refuses to participate in things like the International Criminal Court. They haven't signed up to that, and they don't recognize its jurisdiction over themselves or anyone they like, really, and things like that. And then they.
Okay.
Things. So that's a good example. The International Criminal Court. We'll
come on to the how the banks behave and the assets and stuff like that. But I want to just stay on this drugs thing for a minute, because narco-terrorism, or so as it's called, is defined as terrorism financed by profits from drug trafficking, where drug traffickers use violence or intimidation to influence government policies and hinder anti-drug law enforcement. So where's the overthrowing of Pfizer, Moderna, and all the rest of the people who pushed an unstable drug on the world's population? Nothing going to happen to them then, James?
Well, no, obviously, but the point is, it's a meaningless word. It's a meaningless concept.
Yeah, I think you're right.
What is a narco state? I mean, the state is the state is all the business interests of the country. It's not the government, right? So it starts from a kind of misconception of what the state is, and then, but it isn't just a nonsensical term.
It is, isn't it? Because a you know, they're saying narcotics. Is there a state that isn't run by, you know, the drug companies in the West, in the UK, and people like that have so much power, it's unbelievable.
That might be kind of exaggerated. There's probably
Really, the European
business
Union's not a
interests there,
narco state when Ursula von der Leyen buys 8 doses of a vaccine for every single person in Europe.
European Union is not a state. Anyway, the point is
runs Europe though.
It's not a country, and they this acting like a country, and then referring to European leaders like it is a country or something. No. Anyway, that's all nonsense. The point is that the term is made up to justify what the US is doing. Right.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's a made up word, and you know there's no country like that. I mean, Colombia, you know, ostensibly, the Colombian government has been fighting against the drug trade for years. You know, even if, all sorts of people in government are getting bribes or something from the cartels or something like that. Whatever, you know.
Could I just mention the Contras?
Yeah, well, okay. So, like, the point is, there are cases where, for instance, I think the IRA used to sell drugs on the streets of Dublin or wherever to raise money, or Belfast to raise money for, you know, to make money, you know. But this is like the way that the IRA descended and sort of alienated the people it was representing to a certain extent, not hugely, but to a certain extent, right? But basically, what's that got to do with the government of Venezuela and this whole thing? You know, and the question of whether it's just that all of these things are just made up. You know, that's why I mentioned Barack Obama saying that it is, you know, like Venezuela was a threat to the USA. No, it wasn't, right?
No.
To the US national security, right? No, it wasn't. It never was. It couldn't be. Right?
Just like Greenland.
Not a threat to US foreign policy. In fact, it really wasn't a threat to US foreign policy.
Let me ask you, you're absolutely right. Let me ask you another question, James, because this seems to me very, very strange. Okay, it won't to you. Switzerland froze the assets of Nicolas Maduro just when you need to have some money to purchase a lawyer. And of course, the United States does allow you to have a public defender. It doesn't seem, I mean, they've frozen his assets without him even being convicted. That's got to be naughty, isn't it?
That has been, things like that have been done to Venezuela for years now.
Yes.
Does he have any assets there?
He does, yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that. I'm not privy to his his personal affairs, to be honest. So I would actually question whether he does.
We've actually got a nice little banker friend who's turned around and said he doesn't have a lot there, but he does have some there.
Okay. He's got Julian Assange's former lawyer, a guy called Pollack, representing him, and the US government is probably paying for that, you know, because I don't suppose they're allowing him to transfer funds, and I think the Venezuelan embassy in Washington is shut anyway.
It's going to be a show trial, though, James, isn't it? I mean, the guys saying, "Oh yeah, I used to be a former drug trafficker." Just like, I mean, I'll be amazed if they don't get Rubio's brother-in-law to turn around and say, "I used to do deals with him."
Yeah, it will be a show trial. I wouldn't expect. You see, I would expect that Maduro's lawyers will make arguments like against the jurisdiction of the court, and and other things like that, and that that there's no evidence to back up the charges. I'm not going to jump to conclusions, but I do kind of have doubts about how much material evidence they can actually present. You know what I mean? So his lawyer might move to dismiss the case based on lack of evidence.
Yes.
You know,
what
documents are they going to produce to show something? You know, or what witnesses? You know, you see, you know, if you think about it for a minute, it's very unlikely to be anything, right? You know, they're very unlikely to have anything concrete. But anyway, but the judge will not. That's my prediction. All right, I'm going to stick my neck out on this one. The judge will not allow it to be dismissed, and possibly it will go on for years.
Yeah, well, it's obviously March is when they do it, and they're talking about 2027. I mean, they'll keep this trial going, won't they, till Venezuela have, or they'll keep this trial bubbling up until Venezuela have another election and he can't get in.
Yeah, okay. Well, he won't be standing in the next election, okay. But, I mean, who knows who's going to win the next election?
True.
Let's be honest, Donald Trump has done a favor to the government, because by doing this, he's outraged people who don't really support Maduro. You know, so...
Well, let me ask you this then, because we've had this. This tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? We'll come to Sean Murphy in a second. The BBC put out this guideline to everybody following events, when describing the recent events in Venezuela, use the word captured, which of course we heard Yvette Cooper using there. Please attribute this to the US description of the operation. Example, the US said Maduro was captured during the operation. Seized is acceptable for use in our own reporting where appropriate. Avoid using kidnapped. Thanks for keeping this in mind as you work with related stories. If that isn't framing the narrative, I don't know what is.
Well, editors do things like that, but yeah, I mean, okay, they're trying not to piss off the USA. I mean, you know, they're in a legal battle with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is suing them in Florida for some reason, but you know,
no conflict of interest there, then, James.
Well, no, but I mean, they're probably trying not to piss him off any further, basically.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Sean Murphy's waiting to jump in. Sean,
I was just going to say, you're saying about the trial of Maduro could go, but before it's settled, could be 2027. The thing is, though, the judge they've appointed to hear the case is 92 years old. 90. Is he going to last till the end of the case?
No, I think not. If they do, by then he'll either be sitting on a commode or completely gaga. Lee William.
I was going to ask, are they actually legally allowed to take the oil from another country of Venezuela?
Yeah, it's called piracy.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
It's under the legal law of piracy, or as it's commonly known in other circles, finders keepers. Louis Baston.
Theft.
Just a question, but they do have American companies working in Venezuela, haven't they?
Of course they do, yeah.
So they can take the oil out of the American company.
Yeah, they got tons of them there. I do want to get on. You're absolutely right. I do want to get on to this, James. Let's have a look at the rather embarrassing interview that was had here. Now it's about 5 or 10 minutes long, and hopefully my internet doesn't go down and I'll show you the whole thing. But this was squirming on an epic level, James.
Does the British government support what the US has done? Well, I don't think anyone in Venezuela seems to be sad about the idea that President Maduro is not in office anymore. The UK, like the United States and many of our European allies, didn't recognise the legitimacy of the last election in Venezuela. Indeed, the UK government sanctioned President Maduro himself not long ago. But given what's happened in the last 24, 48 hours, the important question now is ensuring a peaceful transition so that a new president of Venezuela can be elected democratically with the consent of the people of Venezuela, and anything that we can do as a third country in respect of that, we're happy to do so.
But do we support it?
Well, the idea that President Maduro is no longer the president of Venezuela, yes, we always thought it was illegitimate.
So we support the outcome. Do we support the means?
Well, the means is unconventional. There's no denying that. It's for the American administration to explain the legal basis for having done it. The UK
sure, but do we support it?
Well, it doesn't matter one way or another because it's happened and we were not involved.
Surely it matters. We're a UN Security Council permanent member. Surely it matters what we think. Do we support it or not?
Well, the UN Security Council is going to meet this week and the American administration will have to set out the legal basis for the operation.
Are you saying that your own government's view about this matter doesn't matter?
No, I'm saying that we need to see the legal basis for the operation that the Americans undertook. They've not published that detail yet. I'm assuming they will do at the UN Security Council.
Would the British government do this?
Would we do?
Yeah. Would we do what they've done? Would we remove a foreign leader in that way?
It seems unlikely, but we don't know the legal basis for the operation. And as I say, until we've seen the detail of that, we can't really speculate.
President Trump says the US will run Venezuela. Do we support that?
As we've said, as I've just said, there should be a democratically elected president of Venezuela that commands the support of the people of Venezuela. It's a democratic country, has the basis in democracy. And
but when asked last night who would be running Venezuela, Trump said, the men behind me, members of his cabinet. Now, as a politician dedicated to the rule of law, as you said, does that make you feel at all uncomfortable?
Well, we're not really clear yet on the detail of what President Trump meant by that. I understand this morning that the courts in Venezuela have appointed an interim president and that the administration in Venezuela continues to operate. So I can't speculate about what President Trump meant. Only he and his administration can answer those questions. But as I say...
You can say whether you think that on an interim basis, we think it's a good idea that President Trump runs Venezuela.
Sure, all I'm saying is that all I've seen on an interim basis is that an interim president has been appointed in Venezuela by the Venezuelan courts.
And you have no view whatsoever about whether what he's done and what he's proposing to do is legal. You haven't thought about it.
Well, it's not for me to come to a legal judgment.
No, but you've got lots of lawyers. You've got thousands of lawyers working for the government who could.
That will inform the Foreign Secretary's views at the UN Security Council once the detail has been seen. But as
so is that assessment being made currently?
Well, of course, the British government will be at the UN Security Council, so it'll have to take a view having seen...
Will you publish that legal advice?
We don't routinely publish legal advice.
No, but this is important. But so would you give an indication of it?
That's not a decision for me, but we don't normally publish legal advice as a matter of precedent. But of course, if the UN Security Council meets this week, we'll consider that detail when it's published.
Let's imagine that President Putin had kidnapped President Zelensky and his wife and taken them to Moscow. And President Putin said that he's done that to protect the national security interests of Russia. If I was sitting here talking to you and asking whether you thought that was a good idea and whether that was legal, would you be saying to me, well, it's up to the Russian government to produce that legal basis?
Any operation from any sovereign state that recognises international law, I'm not sure that Russia does in these circumstances, but if they do, they have to set out the legal basis for any decisions that they take.
So Russia could do that, and you would just wait for them to produce the legal text?
No, I'm not answering a hypothetical question. What Russia's done in Ukraine is clearly illegal, in the same way that settlements in the West Bank by Israeli settlers are clearly illegal, but they're clearly illegal because they've been judged to be illegal by international courts.
I don't remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, many British politicians, yourself or others included, coming out and saying, well, let's wait a while for lawyers to produce a legal basis. You just said it. You just said it was illegal. So why can't you do that here? Because virtually every legal commentary I've seen this morning has said it is clearly illegal.
So I think the circumstances were different. President Putin undertook a more traditional invasion war into Ukraine. The Americans are saying this was a law enforcement measure.
They've kidnapped, Chief Secretary, they've kidnapped the guy. They've literally abducted him. They've taken him to a New York court. They're publishing pictures. I mean, don't get me wrong. Nasty, horrible, brutal dictator. No one's weeping for him. But the precedent is clear. They are literally putting out pictures of the guy on this helicopter, blindfolded, and you're saying, that could be fine. Might be.
All I'm saying is we can't answer those questions yet because they've not published the legal basis. You've not seen it. I've not seen it. Well, they'll have to make submissions to the UN Security Council.
We've heard it from President Trump, Chief Secretary. He thinks that might is right. The fact that America can do it means they should do it. And indeed, he's saying quite openly that if other countries get in his way, he'll do the same to them. And you're not saying that makes you uncomfortable or worried or disturbed. You think it's just, let's just wait and see?
We want the rules-based order to work, of course we do. But look, this isn't just the position of the UK government. This is the position of other European countries too. Germany has been saying the same as the United Kingdom. All I'm saying is we need the time over the next few days of this week to engage with our American counterparts, for them to publish the legal basis of the operation for the UN Security Council.
Would you urge the United States government not to abduct any other foreign leaders?
Look, I'm not going to answer hypothetical questions.
You won't urge the United States government not to abduct other foreign leaders?
We think the rules-based order matters and that people should comply with international law. When an operation like
this
is...
You're not making an assessment as to whether or not you think it has complied with international law.
Because it's for the Americans to set out the basis of the legal basis on which they did the operation, and then for international courts or the UN Security Council to take a view. I'm not trying to dodge the question, Lewis. All I'm saying is this is the way the rules-based order works. It's not for an individual state to judge international law. It's for the international
courts to do so. In order for a rules-based order to work, surely it's important on those who believe in the rules-based order to point to people who break the rules-based order and say, you've broken it, not just to dodge it because they're friends of ours.
For sure, but we're not the international court. We're the UK government.
No,
the international court
we're supposed
exists.
to be an important country.
Yeah, we are, and we're.
You don't sound like an important country. You don't sound like you're speaking for an important country, Chief Secretary. You sound like you're speaking on behalf of a supplicant country who's afraid of a bigger country.
I disagree with that assessment. We are following the proper process that any government would follow. If this were Russia,
if this were China, if this was anywhere else in the world, we would be the first out the traps, first out the gate, saying this is disgraceful. We condemn it. You know that, I know that.
As I say, we need to see the legal basis for the operation that was undertaken and what President Trump meant by his comments yesterday in terms of the administration.
The wife of Stephen Miller, the President's Deputy Chief of Staff, has tweeted a map of Greenland, you might have seen this, covered with an American flag saying that they're next, saying soon, in capital letters. Would you urge the United States not to invade Greenland?
Of course, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It is a sovereign state in its own right, and the rules-based order and international law is very, very clear. All I'm saying is...
Would you urge them not to abduct the leader of Greenland?
Of course, but all I'm saying is that the Americans' commentary so far has been that this was a law enforcement measure against President Maduro.
They've also said it was about oil.
Well, the action that they've said so far was about law enforcement, but we've not seen any. But we've not seen any more detail about the law enforcement rationale for their operation, and that's what the American administration needs to publish.
There's going to be a vote of censure clearly in the United Nations. How are we going to vote in that motion?
So we've got to see what the motion says. We've got to see what the American explanation is.
Are there circumstances in which we could vote against America?
I don't know. I've not seen the basis of their legal argument, and I've not seen the motion. Of course,
but if we don't find those things satisfactory, could we vote against the United States?
Well, Britain is a sovereign state, a sovereign member of the UN Security Council. It reserves the right to vote in any which way it wants to. All I'm saying is I can't prejudge a motion that's not been written on a legal basis. I've not seen, but the Foreign Office and our representatives in the United Nations will be doing that work over the coming days.
Do you think that Donald Trump is interested in international law?
I mean, he has made very clear that he's interested in trying to resolve peace in Africa and other places around the world.
Do you think he's committed to international law as a concept?
You'd have to ask him the question. I mean, the United.
Well, I'd love to ask him.
Well, I don't speak on behalf of President Trump, as you will appreciate. I don't.
Well, President Putin is clearly not interested in international law. Would you agree with that?
Well, because he's unleashed an unconventional illegal war in Ukraine.
And President Trump has abducted, as you yourself say, in completely unconventional, unprecedented words, abducted a foreign leader. So given everything we know, and given that he's threatening other countries with the same, and given his record in other areas as well, would you say that he's very interested in international law? And I think he would probably say he's not. I'm just interested in what you think.
As I say, I'm not going to try and be a spokesperson for President Trump.
So there we are. James, have you ever seen squirming on such an epic scale as that?
I think the interviewer, the minister there actually sort of admitted something, and the interviewer picked him up on it, that they declared that the Russian intervention, military intervention, whatever, in Ukraine was illegal without, straight away, without seeking legal advice about it. And in fact, Vladimir Putin, in the days up to the outbreak of the war in February 2022, the Russian government was getting its legal ducks in a row. It firstly recognized the self-declared Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics as independent countries. And then the next day signed a mutual defense treaty with them. And then Ukraine continued to attack those countries. It launched military attacks, maybe not huge ones, but it did. And it was probably gearing up to really attack them seriously. But just even by firing a few shells in there justified Russia doing what it's doing now, basically on a legal basis. So They got their, and there's that thing. And then, of course, Donald Trump didn't do anything legal. And the guy keeps saying the word law enforcement, which only people in the US say, because law enforcement, it means policing. And what are the police? The police are a civil force. They are a civilian force, right? They're not, it's not the armed forces. It's not the army or the Delta forces, or, the Air Force and the Navy, which is what they use. You do not use the armed forces, the army, for policing, and you don't use the police as an army, right? And the police have strict jurisdictions. I mean, especially in the USA, they have, they have delineated jurisdictions, right? Including the FBI, which is a police force, right? The FBI, okay, it has jurisdiction over the whole of the USA, but only in certain matters. And, the New York Police Department doesn't have jurisdiction outside of the city limits of New York and things like that. So you can't, so it is not a police. It is not a policing issue, It's not law enforcement, because the law, what law applies? Sorry, in Venezuela, is Venezuelan law, and it's up to the Venezuelan authorities to enforce that. So yes, he doesn't have an answer. He's just waffling, and this is why I say that they didn't know it was going to happen, and they don't know what to say. They haven't got their line sorted out for this.
No, absolutely not.
They were taken by surprise.
Let's get on then, James, because now we're going to talk, and we have to ask you about the implications of this, because obviously China are posting all sorts of things, saying international law, national sovereignty. Given the Venezuelans, there's no doubt that there was insider, shall we say, help for the Americans going in. They wouldn't have gone in unless they literally knew where he was going to be. So that points to somebody very close in his security detail, certainly giving off the information, because normal ministers wouldn't have that sort of thing to know exactly where they're going to be and everything else.
Right.
Given that they've done that, China and Russia are not going to lift a finger here. They're going to complain left, right, and centre, but ultimately nobody can do anything about it, can they? And I'm going to play devil's advocate here for Donald Trump, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble, but it's not quite what you think it is. And I'll explain my rationale out here. The Department of State put out, or the State Department, this is our hemisphere. Basically, the carte blanche for the Americans to do whatever they want in their sphere of influence, and therefore they don't like the government that's in there. They think it's really horrible towards American interests, and they're justified in taking it over.
Well, there is a lot of double standards in US politics, and they're not going to. They're asserting a sphere of influence over the whole of the Americas, but they're not acknowledging, say, a Russian or a Chinese sphere of influence.
Here's the thing, though, James, isn't it? They've got no right then to be interfering in anybody else's sphere of influence.
Well, they don't have a right to be messing around in Venezuela or Mexico or Canada. I mean, that's what the UN Charter says. But no, that's what I'm saying. That they have double standards. They are not acknowledging.
I mean, if they put that BS out there,
sphere of influence. So
okay,
they are going to keep messing around in in Ukraine. I'm sorry, and in Taiwan. They are. That's it.
So I mean, when we look at that, and of course, it makes me. And I totally agree. I don't think they should be doing any of that sort of thing in anybody else's place whatsoever. But that puts. There was a meeting, obviously, in Paris with Zelensky and all the lemons. They can't really. The European Union and everybody else, they're all being just as mealy mouthed. I mean, they're up. Trump's thrown them under the bus, hasn't he? Because they can't really say a damn thing now.
Look, the LBC reporter made the point that you can't really accuse Russia of acting illegally when you're doing the same thing and worse. doing it more blatantly, you know. So you've lost, you know, you lose the moral high ground. I mean, it was never there. They didn't have it to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, Joe Biden wasn't sort of being lovely and nice, and Barack Obama wasn't very nice either. Barack Obama said he was elected to end 2 wars, and he started like more, you know. It didn't end those 2 wars. He just started a load more. So, you know, they're all hypocrites like that. You know, I mean, let's move on from that part of it to what's actually going to happen.
One's an invasion, one's an intervention. When we talk about invasions, when we talk about interventions and everything else, I'm not being funny here, but we do have a problem, don't we? Because there are many people that will turn around and go, "Oh, this isn't an intervention," and everything else. But let's just get into this. So during Trump's second term, he's militarily threatened Mexico, Canada, Cuba, Colombia, Khalid Nunat, Panama, and of course, you know, China, and he's also threatened Greenland now. He's bombed Iran, Nigeria, Yemen, Somalia, Syria, Iraq, and Venezuela. He's threatened to depose the leaders of Cuba, Colombia, and Brazil, and he's kidnapped the leader of Venezuela. But that's hardly the peace president, is it?
Well, no, but you know, they're all like that. You see, that's the thing. He's not being particularly unusual. I mean, okay, he wants to get the Nobel Peace Prize, but a lot of funny people have had the Nobel Peace Prize, haven't they? So,
yeah, absolutely. While we're sort of talking of that, let's have a little look at discussion that took place between an absolute idiot, as far as I'm concerned, and Jeremy Corbyn. I don't know if anybody caught this, but it's very, very appealing. Let's have a listen.
Vanessa Neumann, I mean, what Jeremy Corbyn says about Donald Trump going into a sovereign country and snatching the leader, I mean, that breaks all international laws, does it not?
No, it does not break international laws. I think it was stunning to watch.
Which law does that allow? Which law allows that?
Well,
which law allows that?
Well, the law, the fact that he was a fugitive from justice and not a head of state, and the head of a criminal law, and the head of a criminal organization, and a criminal organization that I have personally been tracking and writing about since I started working for a think tank here in London, the IISS, in 2006. For 20 years, we've been tracking the criminal activity and the transnational threats presented first with the FARC across the border, and that was actually part of the Bolivarian Revolution. That was stated in part of their manifesto, the material support for the FARC, and then you know, a terrorist organization. My daughter's from Colombia because I spend so much time in Colombia working on those issues. So I've tracked that, and then also the involvement of the agreement signed with China and with Iran, and giving succor and protection and cover for Iranian IRGC operatives, which I've chronicled, I think makes him a threat to the region. The rest of the region was not thrilled, by the way.
Where is he a fugitive from justice?
Most of the region suffered the massive exodus. Colombia in particular, there's almost 3 million Venezuelans.
You said he's a fugitive from justice.
Yes.
Where?
United States.
But he wasn't in the United States. He's been in Venezuela.
Doesn't matter where you are. You can be snatched and you can be captured. If you're a criminal on the run.
It doesn't matter where you are or what position you hold, James. And of course, her think tank,
well,
sponsored by Israel.
Like we said, we were talking, it's jurisdictional overreach, and the US does this, right? So, and it's not like I said, they did it with Julian Assange, and they did it with, you know, Noriega. But the woman is saying what's key here is that the woman is saying that he's guilty because she's accused him of something.
Yeah,
you know, she can't really prove it. She can't produce, you know, she can't show you the picture of the IRGC base or something, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps base or something in Venezuela. She can't, you know, whatever that they're trying to say, or Hezbollah, or you know, and she can't prove, you can't link drug trafficking to Nicolas Maduro and actually, I mean, what do they mean by support for the FARC? They didn't support FARC, did they?
No, they didn't.
No, they essentially closed the border with Colombia. They didn't support the FARC anyway. I mean,
no.
The FARC was on its own. The FARC were operating down by the Ecuadorian border, in fact, and they were over. There was the Colombian Air Force attacked a camp that was inside Ecuador years ago, but not in Venezuela. So this sort of thing. So she's made accusations against Nicolas Maduro because she doesn't like Nicolas Maduro because she works for a think tank that wants to get rid of Nicolas Maduro.
Yes, exactly.
And that's justification for her unfounded allegations, a justification for mean he's a fugitive from justice, but he wasn't, and he isn't now. He's in prison, but he wasn't a fugitive from justice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Jeremy Corbyn said.
Eric Jones.
Just one observation. After watching politics since the mid-'70s here, I have to say that after observing everything very carefully in the last 5 years, the only politicians that do what they say are Xi Jinping and Putin and Kim Jong-un. So
yeah,
I mean, I'd like to say differently, but I can't. So
yeah, but I would turn around and say that when we and you have to mention this, that when we talk about the Rothschild Bank, the only two countries that are now left, the other seven have now been replaced. The only two countries left that are literally don't have a Rothschild Bank are Iran and North Korea. North Korea I think they've done magnificently. I think they've done brilliantly because Iran have riots going on at the moment, and I think Iran are very, very stupid to let anybody anywhere near them and let foreign people in. Let's have a listen to this because this is quite telling.
Hello. Hi, Abe. I wanted to ask you since we met last about the issue of Venezuela. Because I heard voices kind of saying it's not so bad, and Latin America is not so bad, but I'm not convinced. And the question
you
is,
have good reason not to be convinced. You have good reason. It is getting worse,
right?
And little by little, as long as oil money works.
I'm told that by our experts, it's the only, except for Iran. It's the only government-propagated anti-Semitism today around the world. It's a
formally, right?
This is
first
quite scary.
Within the country and then outside.
So, are you pressing in any way?
We've talked to Jesse Jackson, who has a relationship, but it's not for camera. But there are other plans.
So, do you give this any credence? Because I do. The fact that we've got Iran and North Korea are the only ones without a Rothschild Bank in there. Do you see the hand of Israel here anywhere, James?
No, I mean, it was the USA that did it. I mean, the USA controls Israel, not the other way around. But it was okay. I mean, look, everyone that the US calls its enemy, right? The US has also accused Venezuela or Nicolas Maduro of being in league with, so yes. Hezbollah, the Iranians, whoever, Russia and China, blah, 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 Cuba. Well, they do work with Cuba, it's mutually beneficial, but they trade with China, and that's it. China trades with everybody. Russia helped them out with a ship full of grain, like a cargo ship full of grain a few years ago. Oh, excuse me. When there was a food shortage, right? Russia helped them out like that. Iran has been, they're having to buy petrol from Iran, petrol and diesel from Iran, because even though they're this huge oil producer, because all their refineries in the USA and they can't make their refineries work, So it's crazy like that. But basically, Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They're just being accused. You know, it's just a catch-all thing. I mean, who's next? They're going to be in league with, you know, the dead, you know, the ghost of Saddam Hussein, and I don't know, Charles Manson, and
does seem that, but with the build up that's going on
Mr.
in
Bodhi,
Iran, with the protesters and the NGOs and everything else, the only, as I say, since 2000, there are 9 countries that didn't have a Rothschild bank. The only 2 that are left now are Iran and North Korea, and
okay, they could have a Barclays bank. I mean, you know, whatever. I mean, the point is,
here's the thing, James. Here's the thing. We're at the moment, we've got coming through the Zangezur corridor, we've got all sorts of NGOs and people going into Iran and trying to cause all sorts of problems in there. The diplomatic overthrow, or they're trying now to overthrow by doing the usual protests inside Iran, and they're building up the military of, you know, we've had loads and loads of tankers flying over the UK, and they're now flying across Europe. If this doesn't work, they're going to have another go at Iran, aren't they? Do you see this in the pipeline?
They might do, but there are disincentives for that. It's not a good idea.
No, it's not.
I mean,
that never stops anyone.
Yeah, I mean, okay, what are they going to do? Are they going to like nuke Iranian cities or something? I mean, you know, if they get into it like they did back in the, you know, earlier, like last year, not earlier this year, last year now, they might have problems, because they had problems then. I mean, it wasn't a total disaster for them, but they ended it before it, you know, it potentially got bad. So what's going to be different now? You know what I mean? They've gone back to the whole thing of getting, you know, the monarchists and the Islam, you know, like the real Islamists, the sort of Al Qaeda types in Iran to riot against the government and kill police officers. They've been doing that every few years for decades now, right? So they've just gone back to that, you know, plan A. They've gone back to plan A. Plan A didn't work, right? No. So, but they're just doing that to make trouble for them. I mean, and then plan B is war. They've tried that one as well. Didn't work.
Okay.
So what's new?
Let me ask you a question then. On your 2026 bingo calendar, which one of these, James Tweedy, is liable to be next? Trump takes Venezuelan's president captive, global blackout, economic crash, mass migration, new global conflict, collapse of a major currency, massive volcanic eruption, asteroid flyby. What are you going for out of this selection, James, for the first thing to happen in 2026?
I think, what can I say? They will probably start a new war somewhere or other, but you know, where's it going to be? There's going to be a lot of prodding of China, and then China might decide to, you know, they're not going. I mean, I don't think China's going to take Taiwan unless it absolutely has no other option. And if the US is smart, it will give them another option, you know. But
you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Does what Trump want to start that one, you know?
As we're talking about China, let's hear from some people on there.
States need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry.
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil companies?
We also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela since 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime, but not to the benefit of people of Venezuela. You know how destabilizing 8 million migrants? The number one fear that Brazil has, that Colombia has, that all these countries in the region have about what's happening in Venezuela and our involvement is they're afraid of another mass migration event. That's what they fear. This is deeply destabilizing stuff.
Says the man who's perfectly okay with Cubans coming in and then changed his position on that. Let's have a look how the Chinese are not very happy, and of course they've made representation, and of course Japan have now stuck their oar in.
法の支配に基づく自由で開かれた国際秩序への挑戦が勢いを増しているということとともに、インド太平洋では中国、北朝鮮の、さらなる軍事力の増強、そして中国、ロシア、ロシア、北朝鮮の連携強化、などが見られております。
So James, is it likely, you were saying they might not give they might not give China a choice here. Is it going to be Japan that's kick all this off?
I don't know. I think Japan is turning into South Korea, because South Korea it goes between like a kind of a government wants to negotiate with other people, wants to make peace with its neighbors, and then a very then it will swing back to a very warlike one, and Japan is not supposed to be like that, because its constitution is supposed to be not pacifist, but like interventionist, non-aggressive. So, but that's what I think it is. I mean, I think they'll have another prime minister soon, and it will calm down. But Japan can't threaten China militarily. US bases in Japan can, but that's up to the US. Well, I'm going to say something about what Rubio said about, we don't need their oil, and Russia doesn't need their oil, and Iran, like I said, Iran is sending petrol, is refining petrol and sending it to Venezuela because of the situation. The situation's got so bad there. But what Donald Trump is talking about is that US companies are going to go in there and fix the infrastructure. In other words, they're going to invest money in things that aren't going to pay out for like 20, 30, 50 years.
Absolutely.
Right? And they're going to get, when oil is at a very low price, there's very little profit to be made from it as well. And Venezuelan crude oil is very heavy. And this is one of the things that, they export it to these refineries in the US that they own, right? Or nominally they own. I mean, it's been sequestered by the US government, but those are special refineries for heavy oil.
Yes.
Extremely heavy oil and heavy crude oil. So, this is all, it's not terribly profitable. You don't see how, how do you get from kidnapping Nicolas Maduro to making a big profit, making a load of money? The part in between is totally unclear. Nobody has an idea how they're going to do that.
No. So let's talk about this for a second then, James, because I had a feeling you might bring this up. Now, the United States flooded the market after taking control of oil from Iraq and Libya, apparently. Now, so Iraq, in 2000, before the war, before sanctions, 2.8 million barrels a day. 2003, during the war, 1.2 million barrels a day. 2015, 3.5 million barrels a day. It took almost 10 years to return to pre-war production levels, and another 12 years to double production despite Iraq's vast reserves. After the war, it was widely believed that Iraq would be able to achieve production levels of 8 million barrels per day by 2020. Fast forward to 2025, and Iraq produces half of that volume despite spending 220 billion. Libya has followed the same path. In 2010, peak before the war, it was 1.7 million barrels a day. Current production is only 1.3 million barrels a day. After 15 years, Libya has not reached its pre-war production level. Now look at Venezuela. First of all, as you say, Venezuela produces super heavy oil that is as thick as tar. It doesn't flow naturally, must be melted to reach the surface. After extraction, it hardens again, requiring dilution for transportation. About 0.3 barrels of diluent must be imported for each exported barrel. Venezuela's infrastructure is in bad shape. It suffers from regular power outages. Export terminals are falling into disrepair. The oil infrastructure is in far worse condition than in war-ravaged Iraq was. In other words, rebuilding Venezuela oil industry is going to take forever. It takes billions of dollars and tens of years of work just to get back to pre-war production levels. This time's not going to be any different, is it, James?
You see, if you're importing more oil than you're exporting, right, you want the price to be low. And if you're exporting more oil, you want the price to be high.
Yep.
And a lot of the things that the US has done over the years have been about that. You know, like the Iran nuclear deal allowed Iran to sell, to export oil, you know, or more oil. And it brought the price down, you know, because the US was importing oil at the time. And then Donald Trump came to power, and then not necessarily through his policies, but at that time anyway, he claimed responsibility for it, is they started exporting more oil. You know, they got their production up and they started exporting more oil than they were importing. And then he put sanctions on Venezuela and stopped them exporting oil to the US. You see, so although almost all of it, well, almost all their oil went to the US, and he was basically sanctioning their trade with the US. By getting it off the market, he raised the market price, and the market price went up all over the world. So it goes up and down, right? So, yeah. Do they want that oil on the market now? You know, they're not actually lifting the sanctions yet. So how are you going to get the oil? If they want the oil, lift the sanctions, you get the oil, right? That goes onto the market. It dumps the price. If they want the price to be high, then you don't want Venezuelan oil. You want no Venezuelan oil. You want to stop Venezuelan oil. You don't want US companies extracting Venezuelan oil. You see, so you want it. So so let's see what they do. You know, maybe they want the price to go back up. Maybe they think it's too low, and that the US oil companies just don't want it. You know, they don't want it on the market, and maybe they don't want Iranian oil on the market either. They think that's how they're going to control it and push the price back up.
Now, I want to ask you a question on this. Now, we revealed this yesterday. Maria Zakharova has had her say on this now, saying that that Ukraine is a haven for neo-Nazis. And this is in response to the fact that Christopher Freeland is now an advisor on the economic development. Of course, all neo-Nazis together, isn't it, James?
Yeah, exactly. Her grandfather, you know, one of her two grandfathers was this Ukrainian guy who lived in Poland and published an anti-Semitic propaganda newspaper for the Nazis, you know, in which he also, you know, he said the Poles should be exterminated or something. But, you know, he, and then so she's, you know, it's not surprising really. It's really unironic, actually. It's, she's, you know, there was this, on the day that, you know, on February the 24th, 2022, she was out in the middle, in Toronto or wherever, with a small group, a little gaggle of Ukrainians, basically protesting against the Russians, and she was holding up this red and black flag. That's the the flag, or the scarf that's in the colours of the flag, the red and black colours of the flag of the Ukrainian Partisan Army, or whatever it was called, Insurgent Army.
But basically the neo-Nazis, Yeah,
they were guilty of huge war crimes against Polish-speaking people. They killed like 50,000 Polish speakers or something.
They did,
you know, during the war, and they killed Jewish people as well. And then like she posted that on her social media, and then she took it down later when people started pointing that one out. But you know, she's I mean, shameless, really.
Yes, one has had their own troubles with Canadians and neo-Nazis. I got in a lot of trouble for pointing that out. The problem is, though, isn't it, that Canada had an awful lot of neo-Nazis that went there after the war. I mean, certainly around certain areas of Canada, there was a massive influx of Ukrainian Nazis.
Yeah, exactly, and it was deliberate and planned, and basically, I think they chose Canada as a place that they would transplant them all to. You know, they'd made it. They were in basically they were part of the Axis forces. They were fighting alongside the Germans, and some of them made it to far enough west that they surrendered to the Western Allies, and they were in British or US prison camps and prisoner of war camps, and they were selected as the Cold War was beginning, and shipped off to places where they could, they could be used as agents against the Soviet Union.
I want to ask you about this because while we're on the subject of Ukraine, we've reported quite often that they've been burying the bodies or burning them so they don't, or refusing to identify them so they don't have to pay out the money, the government. But once they die, do you give this report any credence, James?
In recent years, a disturbing trend has been observed in Ukraine. The state is seizing property from childless widows of deceased military personnel. According to a law adopted by Zelensky in 2024, apartments are transferred to state ownership under the pretext of the spouse's failure to fulfill a combat mission. Widows receive official notifications from the cadastral registry and are forced to legally formalize the transfer of housing under the threat of deprivation of payments, as well as the inclusion of the deceased's name in the Maritvaret's database. They are compelled to deregister themselves, relatives, and minor children, regardless of the availability of another place of residence, which leads to eviction onto the street. Liquid housing in prestigious districts, such as the center of Kiev, is being seized with particular intensity. In 2024, 1,200 families were affected, and in 2025, the number of seized apartments has already exceeded 3,000. This constitutes a gross violation of human rights and constitutional norms. The Foundation to Battle Injustice urges the Ukrainian authorities to immediately cease this practice and provide protection to vulnerable families.
James?
Well, not on the basis of like an AI slot video like that. No, I'm not going to. Is there okay? The one claim that you could possibly try and verify off that is that that missing soldiers or dead soldiers have had their names listed on that database, which is like a hit list.
Yes, I had a little check of that. That is true, and the law is true. I was just wondering if you were aware of any more information.
No, okay. Well, all right. So let's see. I mean, is it because they are, they're saying that they've deserted? Failure to perform a mission is a weird language.
Yeah.
There's lots of weird language in that.
Deserted,
It's translated and it's being read out by an AI voice, and there's lots of AI imagery in there.
Yes.
So
always makes
I mean, are you saying that, are they trying to say that people are deserters or absent without leave, and therefore they lose their property?
Exactly that.
They do that. It's a question because there is a question of whether Ukrainian troops or who are those listed who are missing, how many of them are dead and how many of them have just run away.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
There is a lot of evidence, like video evidence of skeletal corpse remains being found in woods and things, that the Ukrainian army does not pick up its dead and it leaves them for the Russians to pick up and bury. And that they only come back to Ukraine when in those exchanges between the Russians, the Russian of soldiers' remains between Russia and Ukraine, and those don't happen all that often. I mean, they happen fairly regularly, but not that many. You're talking about maybe 1,000 a month or something, or every couple of months. So we have, one exchange per month. And the Russians are giving them 1,000 corpses, and they're getting like 30 or 40 back in exchange. But I always assumed that was essentially forcing the Russians to do unpleasant work and avoiding paying pensions to widows.
Yeah, absolutely.
They would have to pay otherwise.
Let's get into this then, because this has now come about. You will remember, obviously, as everybody does, the execution of Charlie Kirk, allegedly, or certainly, as far as I'm concerned, by a trans, shall we say, activist. It now turns out that the shooting of J.D. Vance's windows, we knew that the guy was actually captured. Turns out to be a tranny who now calls himself, who actually is now called Julia Defoe, put herself down as trans. The violent trend of trans having a go at people and doing naughty things. Still nothing to see here, James.
Well, it's more extreme over there because there's some other cases. I mean, did that person like decide they were transsexual after they were arrested, or was it sometime before?
No, it's been on their social media quite a lot. But I just thought,
yeah, okay. So in
point
Britain, there's
out
an organisation now. Yeah, in Britain now, there's an organisation called Bash Back, a trans, so-called trans rights organisation. But what they do is they go around, breaking, attacking buildings which are holding meetings, hosting meetings by feminists, and the feminists are kind of against the trans thing, basically, because of all the
like Kelly
the
J.
issues
King
that are associated with it that are not,
Well,
not being addressed at all.
Do you how can I put it? Do you correlate the trans movement with the amount of violence that comes out from these people?
There is violence, yes. I mean, there is a couple of there have been a couple of murders, and they're under investigation. But some people are speculating in the media, based on they're reporting that it was a group of transsexuals. It's not being made terribly obvious in the mainstream media, but it is being reported around that there was a group of transsexuals in the US that were murdering people, and possibly it was some sort of cult. It's too much of a coincidence that several people who associate with each other have murdered people, right? Or accused of murder. Anyway,
absolutely.
They haven't been convicted yet, but they've been accused of murder. This Bash Back thing is like sort of escalating. It's attacking. It's gone to vandalism. It's intimidating women at events by shouting abuse at them. It's threatening. It's allegedly threatening people online. And the latest thing is that they got some hackers to obtain the membership list of the Free Speech Union. Yes. Which they don't like because that free speech is the freedom to criticize transsexuals, or to call Deirdre is actually Dave and point that out and say he's a man, that sort of thing, right? So they've got their hands, they've doxed them, right? They've got their hands on all their addresses and telephone numbers, and they've published them on the internet so that people can go around and anyone who feels like it can go around and smash their windows like they did to J.D. Vance. So this is a thing, and Vance has come under attack before as well, hasn't he? He's had people.
I think it's
shouting abuse at him in the street.
I think it's a much more dangerous thing, especially with the drugs they're giving them. Some of the psychotic drugs they're giving them. For me, it's something that is quite awful. Let's have a quick shout at this, James, because this
major breaking political news out of St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Tim Walz will not seek re-election as governor, and what a fall from grace this has been for him. You might recall in the spring of 2023, he pushed through several progressive ideas to the state legislature that caught the attention of Barack Obama, who went to Twitter to give his endorsement for the programs, which eventually caught the attention of people like Kamala Harris, who chose him to be his.
Is he being a scapegoat, James Tweedy, for the daycare centre scandal, or should people be looking at him?
I think it's a way of. It's obvious, I suppose it's a way of avoiding prosecution. You sort of you kind of decapitate yourself, basically.
Yes.
You know,
fall on your own sword.
Sacrificial. Yeah. You know, and maybe he hopes that, you know, they won't bother to prosecute him if he's not going to stand again. There's a question about this that a lot of money was paid. You know, there have been convictions, quite a few convictions, right?
Yeah.
That people have received money fraudulently for running, you know, from the state government there in Minnesota, you know, for providing services that they didn't provide, right?
No.
Health, childcare, and, you know, like nurseries, and possibly healthcare as well. So, but the question is, if that's corrupt, then there has to be some sort of quid pro quo. And what I guess I would expect is, because the government was run by the state government is run by the Democratic Party, were those businesses making donations to the Democratic Party with that money that, you know, it's taxpayers' money. It didn't cost the Democrats anything themselves. Were they paying it back to, you know, were they feeding donations back to the Democratic Party so they had lots of money to fight campaigns or to employ people that they like or whatever, right? That's, see, no one has actually, I haven't seen anyone saying that yet. That's the thing.
I'll tell you what I did here, James. I'll tell you what I did here was absolutely bizarre. Was they turned around and said he shouldn't be prosecuted because they don't prosecute OnlyFans for taking money off of people and not performing the prostitute service. I mean, could you think of anything more daft to come out of a council chamber than that?
Yeah, but what does that mean? No, I mean, he, let's say you've got to prove that he knew something, by the way, and they've, you know, he may well have actually covered his tracks.
There's going to be layers, isn't there? Let's face it.
But you see, to bring it, that's what I'm saying. To bring it back to them, you've got to prove some sort of quid pro quo.
Yes.
Right? That someone was getting money back off it. Were they actually paying bribes? Maybe they were paying bribes directly to civil servants in the state government or to the elected, you know, the governor, him, Waltz, and, you know, members of the state legislature to do that. Maybe they were paying, you know, that would be something that's obviously criminal. And if there was you can prove, if you could show, even if you could show that they were all donating the money back to the Democratic Party, that could be a quid pro quo, and you could make a criminal case out of that. Whether it would fly, I don't know. But
absolutely.
If Waltz doesn't benefit, if Waltz didn't benefit directly from it, and he's covered his tracks, so he can say he didn't know, then they can't really prosecute him.
Let's get into this, James, because I know you're very skeptical about conspiracy theories. We've had I'm very much. I have a different way of thinking about Andrew Bridgen. Is Maduro in the same club as Keir Starmer, both making unnatural hand gestures? First of all, I'd have to say to Andrew Bridgen, really, is that the what you're going to talk about now? But the deflection that is going on with lots of people coming out with all sorts of strange theories on top is not helpful, is it, James?
You know, Tony Blair was somebody, I think he's probably the first politician who I really noticed used to do this. And he used to do this sort of thing, you know, when he was speaking and all that, you know. And what's this? It's partly it's to stop you from fidgeting with your hands. You have to do something with your hands. You could put your hands behind your back. You were in the army, weren't you? I guess that's, you know, the sort of thing you would do. I know some other guys who were in the army, and they said that at boxing matches you had to sit there. You couldn't do anything while you know, in regimental boxing matches, you had to sit there with your hands on your knees, silently watching them, you know, in silence.
Watching bells out of each other.
Yeah, exactly, until the bell rang, and then you could cheer.
Then you could jump
basically, you know, it's something you to do with your hands, so you're not fidgeting. Basically, you know, and that's based on a court sketch. I mean, that's not a photograph; that's a court sketch.
No, exactly that.
I don't know what he was really doing. You know,
no, one of those, isn't it? Talk about total irrelevance. But of course, those sort of things are going to start coming out. You're going to see more and more of that. Our final thing before, and we do need to have a word with you, so please don't go anywhere. Our final thing is this. This is the way to see in the new year, isn't it, James? The longest ice ride in the world in China, apparently it takes something along the lines of 9 minutes to get from the top to the bottom, where there's 30 great big fairground. That's the way to see in the new year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very nice.
One of those. James Tweedy, where can people find you on your social media?
Yeah, on X at L Tweedy, ELTWDEEDIE.
And can I please urge you to go along and follow James and follow his work. Some of the stuff he does is absolutely brilliant, and he doesn't get enough credit for it. And he's been a magnificent friend to the show all of last year, and we hope he'll continue to be this year. Just want to say this as well. This is the last time you will be able to watch the full show without subscribing. So if you want to watch full shows from in future, you will have to come across to warrenthornton.com or go on to Patreon, type in Warren Thornton, and of course subscribe, because we from now on will only be putting out, we've been very, very good to you over the last week. We will only be putting out the first hour of each show, and that will go down to half an hour, and it's literally the price of a pint. For that, you get a subscriber show in the morning. You also get other events that we take part in, and other stuff that we take part in. And of course, you can come and watch the full show here for 2 hours, 6 days a week, and it's the price of a pint. That's it for a whole month. Thank you very much. That's the blurb over with. We have run out of time. And once again, as always, we say a massive thank you to James Tweedy. But for the time being, it's goodbye from me.
And it's good night from him. Good